Hey guys, Steve here from Vorsprung Suspension in Whistler. Welcome to the Tuesday Tune. This is a short video series where we talk tech about suspension, anything and everything, all brands, all models, and discuss things that aren't commonly discussed elsewhere in order to just put some interesting information out there. This week, we're going to look at the evolution of Fox's float air springs. So this is current generation Fox 36. This is current generation Fox 40 float. This is Remy's fork that just came back from Rampage. We have some of the previous generation stuff here as well. So we're going to run you through the way that the float air springs are designed and how they've changed over time, what's improved, and yeah, just put it out there so you guys have got something interesting.
So we're going to start with what are the earlier generations of float air spring.
So this is the spring plunger of this is actually second generation float. So the main difference between this and the very first generation is there's two of these U-cup seals here that you can see. The reason for that was, and anyone who's owned the first generation float air springs will attest to this, these U-cups are a very good one-way seal. They're very good at sealing pressure that's pushing down the air pressure. They're not so good at scraping the oil off the inside of the stanchion. And so what would happen when there was only the one U-cup is that oil would essentially get up into the air chamber that wasn't supposed to be there from the lowers. So it'd have two negative effects. First of all, it would fill your air chamber up with oil, and particularly when people would only service the lowers of their fork, this created issues because it would mean that the lubrication oil in the lowers was now in the air spring. It would also mean that it was the equivalent of putting volume reducers in your air spring, but as the level of oil got higher and higher above the piston, it got harder and harder to use full travel, and eventually the fork would bottom on essentially like close to hydraulic lock, really. So they added this second U-cup here, which is just a scraper seal. I don't know if you can see that well on the camera there. And, so the idea of that is that it just basically scrapes the oil off the inside of the stanchion, prevents it getting up there. That was a big improvement. What you can see here as well, this is the coil negative spring. So when the fork tops out, it will essentially, try and get it there, hit like that. And so the air pressure here compresses it like that. And so the negative spring is actually trying to compress the fork. So what you can see, there's two springs, one inside the other. This smaller one on the inside is just a top out spring, so that's made to make it very stiff and prevent it overshooting. This one here is quite soft, and that dictates the stiffness of the initial travel. Limitation of this style of air spring really was that these only ever came with one variant of coil negative spring, as in there's only one spring rate, you couldn't change it. So if you're particularly light, particularly soft, then that would mean that you couldn't really have it set up ideally for yourself. Later generations in the Float 40 were apparently going to have exchangeable negative springs, but that never really eventuated on the market. There are only a few of them ever made, as far as I can tell. Single rate negative spring wasn't such a big deal for shorter travel forks. When we're talking 100, 120 mil travel forks, it worked fine. 80 mil, completely fine. Once we got up to 160, this is out of 36, 160 mil of 36. Once we got up to 150, 160, 200 mil travel forks, then it became more of a big deal because the pressure differences meant that lighter riders weren't able to get the fork to fully extend. Heavier riders weren't able to run the pressure that they wanted without it essentially topping out. So that being first/second gen, Fox later moved on to this variant here. So this variant here has a similar sort of setup. It has one top out spring there, and it has, this is a top out bumper, this red thing here, piston with two U-cups that are facing opposite ways, and then it has also this much longer negative spring. And so that meant it could be active over much more. So the current generation of float air springs are, as I said before, fully air sprung. That means air positive, air negative. The advantage of that, really, the biggest single advantage of that is that the air negative chamber means that it's always, the spring rate of the negative spring is always in direct proportion to the positive spring, as compared to the coil negatives, which are always a fixed rate. So those work with a certain range of pressures, whereas the air negative ones, in theory, work at any pressure. So this one here, 36, the NA float air spring. This is comprised of two parts. We have the spring plunger here. So this has your air piston, seal head, top out bumper, and we have the top cap as well. It has your air valve, and this is the transfer shaft. If you have a good look in there, you can see that little dimple. Don't know how good the camera is at focusing on everything at once. So this is a really cool system in that it lets you easily adjust the travel. So you can insert spaces in here, basically between this, and that will reduce your travel. And you can also at the same time adjust where the transfer port is for that particular travel setting by popping out a little screw up here and simply shifting that up. So it's a really cool system in that they only have to make there's only one part number that they have to make for a given size of fork there. And it's fully self-equalizing. It doesn't require machining or punching the stanchion. From a design point of view, that's pretty good. It also means, it gives us the opportunity to insert volume spaces like this thing here. The disadvantage of this system compared to the old float system, this now has 1, 2, and 3 moving seals. So it was kind of interesting. This was released at about the same time as the current Talus system. When they released the current Talus system, one of the selling points was that it went from having 3 dynamic seals to 1 dynamic seal. Meanwhile, the float system went from having 1 dynamic seal to 3 dynamic seals. So that was the first generation of the fully air-sprung float systems. They worked well. Unsurprisingly, Fox did a very good job of making sure friction in that was low. Very few people have complaints about these. So despite the additional moving seals, I think that was still a step up overall. The next generation, this comes out of a 40. So this is top cap, this is Ramy's fork, hence the 50 million spaces. It's actually 5, I exaggerate very slightly. This is a similar sort of iteration to like a Pike solo air spring. So this equalizes between the positive and negative chambers through a dimple in the stanchion. That dimple is pressed in on the inside, which must be really good fun to manufacture, because it would of course mean that you either have to machine it, which means deburring it afterwards, or even more fun, you would have to press it, and that would mean doing the stanchion in 2 operations instead of 1 on the lathe. Anyway, this whole top cap here is actually part of the negative air spring. So you can see there's holes in the bottom of that. So this area here, between the seal and the seal head here, is part of the negative air chamber, and so is this whole volume of this gold cap. And the reason that Fox can do this in this particular fork is because with 40 you have these really long way apart. So the fact that this protrudes into the positive chamber actually works well, not against it. So this has a very, very large negative air spring chamber, and that means that it is particularly linear and it needs to run like higher volume in the positive chamber, and it means that you run at relatively high pressures compared to something that will run a smaller negative chamber. The system of it's very similar to RockShox's bottomless token system here. These spaces just clip together, pretty neat. Everything works simply and easily. In my opinion, this is probably the best fork air spring currently out there, simply because it is the closest thing to replicating a coil, but with the advantage, the air advantage of being able to adjust your ending stroke separately. So from that we can see the way that Fox have developed their air springs over time. I think it's pretty cool seeing it go from something so simple as a really basic coil negative spring, And obviously we haven't touched on the travel adjust systems here. The travel adjust systems went from sticky and a bit crappy to various iterations of pretty much the same thing until the current generation, which is much smoother and, funnily enough, is literally exactly the same as the old float air springs. It has a coil negative spring, but the whole assembly just shifts up and down in the floor. So in that regard, one moving seal instead of three, that's great. The hydraulic travel adjust system is prone to sucking air into the oil over time, needing to be rebled. But other than that, they've been reliable and simple, and they feel pretty good. Anyway, guys, I hope you learned something interesting there. Feel free to leave comments. We're always interested to hear what you have to say.